Alright, so I recently came across this tweet from Marjorie Taylor Greene, and if you don't know who she is a Republican congresswoman representing Georgia's 14th district in the US House of Representatives, so she is an elected official. Now, she essentially just tweeted this picture, and the picture is filled with patents that supposedly prove that the government can control the weather, insinuating that hurricanes and rainstorms can be man-made, which is just really stupid. But for this video, I'm going to go through all the patents that can be read because the image is so low res that half of it is just blurry slop and not legible. And I would wish she would at least post something that people can actually read, but of course the image is not for those who actually want to read about it, but will just see a big jumble of words and go, wow, yeah, you're right. Before we hop into actually talking about these patents, let's explain what they are. So a patent is essentially a legal right granted to an inventor that gives them exclusive control over their invention for a certain period of time that's typically around 20 years. It means that no one else can make, use, or sell the invention without the inventor's permission, and the idea behind patents is to encourage innovation by rewarding people who come up with new ideas or technologies. If you didn't know this, just about anybody can apply for a patent. You could apply for a patent. The invention doesn't even have to be based on solid science or even practicality. As long as the idea is new and hasn't been patented before, it could be eligible, even if it's completely impractical or silly. There are patents not based on factual science, such as a patent for a flying saucer. There's one for a bird diaper, which is designed specifically for birds to keep them from leaving poop everywhere. And there's also one called the apparatus for facilitating the birth of a child by centrifugal force. And the idea behind this one was that when a woman would be ready to deliver her child, she would lie back on a circular table, be strapped down, and then rotated at high speed. And the baby... Jesus. And the baby would come flying out of her. However, I don't want to downplay this because there have also been life-changing patents, as Alexander Graham Bell patented the telephone, allowing the transmission of voice over long distances. We got the patent for the light bulb by Thomas Edison, and we also have the patent for the CRISPR gene editing technology, which is fairly new, and this allows for precise editing of DNA of living organisms, which could lead to cures for genetic diseases, more resilient crops, and advances in biotechnology. And something that's recent, they genetically modified mosquitoes to the point where some of them cannot even pierce human skin with their little needle noses anymore. So yes, there are some great patents, some life-changing ones. However, just because something is patented does not mean it works. It does not mean it is based on factual science. I want to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, just real quick. And this is a psychological phenomenon where people with low ability, knowledge, or competence in a particular area tend to overestimate their own skills. In simple terms, it's when people are so inexperienced in something that they don't realize how bad they are at it. They think they know more than they do because they lack the understanding to recognize their mistakes or limitations. For example, a beginner in chess might think that they're really good after winning a few games, but as they play more skilled opponents, they realize how much they still need to learn. This effect was named after psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who demonstrated this cognitive bias in their studies. And one person I want to apply it to with multiple patents is Terrence Howard. All right, just hang with me. Some of you know about this, some of you don't. Give me a second. All right, so Terrence Howard, while best known for his acting career, has delved into the world of patents with very unconventional ideas, and his patents actually reflect his belief in an alternative system of mathematics and physics, which he calls teriology. He has ideas such as the belief that 1 × 1 = 2, and this forms the foundation of his alternative theories. This man literally went to Oxford to talk to a group of students about his acting career, but started talking about his pseudoscience, telling these students that 1 × 1 = 2, and that what Da Vinci did at 30 years old, he did at 6. I don't know. If you listen to it yourself, it's a whole bunch of mumbo jumbies.
Energy can't be created or destroyed, so if 1 × 0 = 0, then what happened to the energy of the 1?
So then, are you saying that 1 times 5 would be 6?
Yes.
But this man has multiple patents. He has a quote, systems and methods for enhanced building block applications patent, which describes a complex building block system where the blocks are designed with curvilinear edges and vertices. And he claims that these blocks can generate electrostatic and magnetic fields, potentially leading to new forms of propulsion. He's got another patent called the systems and methods for transcendental lighting applications, which was a system involving building blocks equipped with magnetic materials that could be used to create various geometric shapes and lighting structures. Several others, including like pentagonal and tetrahedral blocks, which he suggests could be applied in construction and propulsion systems. And he has literally had his work peer reviewed, and any negative feedback he got, he was just like, nah, you're wrong. I'm right, which is not the way science is supposed to be practiced. But some people get too in their own head that they believe that they know more than everyone else and cannot process their own faults. And when you build a pseudoscience based on the idea that 1 times 1 equals 2, you're kind of fucked. I digress. Back to Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweet. Now, she posted this for one of 2 reasons. Either she truly believes what she's saying, insinuating that the government can control the weather with usage of these patents that I'm going to read out to you. In which case, once I prove her wrong by the end of this video, I would like that spot in Congress. Or she is just straight up grifting. And in simpler terms, grifting refers to the acts of purposefully engaging in deceitful or fraudulent schemes for personal gain, often involving manipulation or exploiting others for money or influence. And I will say that this was posted on Twitter, so most likely she does make some form of revenue for the interactions. And I will also mention that grifting is practiced across the political spectrum and is not limited to right-wing figures. Either way, this is an elected official. Yeah, let's get into these patents. I tried to list out all the ones that I could read because, as you can see, there are some that are just completely just, I don't know, bro. And I'm going to list out all these in the description below so you can actually read them for yourselves. But first off, we have this patent from 1891, US3174150A, which was a method of producing rainfall. And this was made by Louis Gathman, and he was actually a popular inventor who created the Gathman gun, or a large howitzer cannon. And I would also like to point out, I don't want to put down any of these inventors, right? Because things fail. That's the whole point of innovation in science. You're going to fail, and it's okay to fail as long as you know, keep moving forward. Yeah. So this was a weather modification invention which involved using liquefied carbon dioxide to trigger rainfall through rapidly cooling and concussive explosions. His patent described a process in which CO2 would be released into the atmosphere to cool the air, which would then cause condensation and then precipitation. And the idea was that this rapid cooling would form clouds, and a concussive blast would stimulate air currents, further enhancing rainfall process. Now, despite his innovative approach, the science behind his method was flawed, as releasing compressed gas like CO2 into the atmosphere would indeed cause localized cooling, but not necessarily in the quantities or under conditions that would consistently produce rain. And this practice was not widely adopted. And his rainmaking invention is remembered more as a speculative curiosity rather than a functional technology. Alright, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US3174150A, and this was James M. Cordray's 1914 patent for a rainmaking invention which involved using explosives, nitrogen, moisture, and heat to disturb and manipulate the atmosphere to produce rainfall. His invention was based on a series of steps including sending balloons carrying various materials like explosives, water, and chemicals such as chloride of potash and sulfuric acid to agitate and moisten the air at different elevations. The general idea was making the air explode, and adding moisture would create rain. Like other early weather modification attempts, his invention ultimately failed due to the impracticality of the science behind it and the unpredictable nature of atmospheric dynamics. There are a lot of things to take into account, like wind, temperature, and air pressure that affect rain, and his idea didn't take any of that into account. While it was a creative idea, it didn't actually make rain, and scientists didn't use his method again. Therefore, it was not reliable in weather modification. Alright, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US3174150A, and this was Joseph A. Steinmetz's 1917 invention that is specifically not a weather modification technology, but rather a defensive measure designed to protect soldiers from poisonous gas attacks during warfare. This invention proposed using a curtain of heated air and combustion gases to deflect against incoming poisonous gases, such as those used in trench warfare during World War I. Now, the general idea was that if you set a line of gasoline on fire in front of soldiers' trenches, the hot air from the fire would push the dangerous gas up and away from the soldiers. Now, while it made sense that hot air goes up and could lift the gas, this idea didn't work very well, as wind was not necessarily taken into account. Therefore, the success of the system was highly dependent on weather conditions such as wind direction and speed, and if the wind changed or was too strong, the rising curtain of hot air could easily dissipate or fail to effectively deflect the gas. And there is no documented evidence that this system was widely used or proven effective in real wartime situations. And also, soldiers had better ways to protect themselves, like gas masks. And because of this, Steinmetz's invention was not widely used. It was a clever idea, but not practical. It is not a weather modification device. Alright, the next one we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was Paul Weiss and Jules Verdier's 1920 patent for the production of intense artificial clouds, or mist, that was not intended as a weather modification device, but rather as a method to create dense artificial fogs. The patent describes a process where chemicals like anhydrous titanium chloride or stannic chloride are atomized into a moist atmosphere, producing thick, opaque clouds, and the invention was primarily aimed at producing visual obstructions, likely for military applications like camouflage or smoke screens, rather than influencing weather patterns or precipitation. Now, the fog worked for short-term uses like hiding things during battle, but it couldn't change the weather or do anything like making rain. Let's just call this an early smoke machine. Alright, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US3174150A, and this was Charles J.S. Miller's 1924 patent that aimed to create a method of removing fog over bodies of water such as seas, lakes, and swamps by applying a specialized oil-based composition. The idea was to use a combination of oil and volatile substances that would form a thin film over the surface of the water, preventing air from contacting the water, which Miller believed would halt fog formation. Additionally, the volatile components in the mixture were intended to rise into the atmosphere, lifting and dissipating any existing fog. While the invention was theoretically plausible in its mechanics, it did not succeed in practice due to several key limitations, as fog is mostly caused by cool air meeting warm, moist air, not just from water evaporating. Also, spreading oil over big areas of water was really hard and not very good for the environment.
I'm deeply sorry.
And even if the fog dispelling composition worked in ideal conditions, i.e. small, controlled bodies of water with minimal wind, it would have limited use in more dynamic environments where fog formation is continuous or spread over large distances. So this invention did not end up being useful or used much because it didn't really solve the problem of fog. Alright, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US1619183A, and this was a 1927 patent filed by Donald E. Bradner and Nicholas E. Oglesby for a process of producing smoke clouds from moving aircraft, and was not intended as a weather modification invention, but rather as a method for generating smoke screens from aircraft. The idea was to drop smoke-producing liquids such as titanium tetrachloride or similar compounds from moving airplanes, and these chemicals would react with atmospheric moisture to create a dense cloud of smoke, useful for military purposes such as hiding troops, ships, or aircraft from enemy view. Now, the invention successfully produced smoke screens from moving aircraft, which were useful in military applications, but this was not made to change the weather, like making it rain or clearing real clouds. It was just for making smoke to hide things, and it worked fine for that. Alright, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US1665267A, and this was Axel Vidar Jernberg's 1928 patent for a process of producing artificial fogs that was not intended as a weather modification tool, but rather as a method to create artificial fog or smoke screens, primarily for military or industrial purposes. The invention involved a sophisticated process in which materials such as phosphorus were finely divided in multiple stages before being released into the open air, and the goal was to create dense, controlled fogs by using these chemical reactions. Now, the invention worked for making fake fog, but it wasn't safe because the use of materials like phosphorus posed significant risks, as it's highly reactive and could lead to dangerous chemical reactions, making this method hazardous to operate. And it had very specific uses, mostly for military or factories, and it wasn't used at all to make rain or change the weather. It did what it was supposed to do: make artificial fog. Alright, the next one we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was John L. Burney's 1932 patent for an atomizing attachment for airplane engine exhaust that was designed as a device for spraying insecticides or other liquids from an airplane using the high-velocity exhaust gases from the airplane's engine. The apparatus used a Venturi tube to atomize the liquid, such as oil or insecticide, by mixing it with the hot exhaust gases, creating a fine mist or spray. And this spray would then be distributed over fields or other areas, primarily to combat pests on vegetation. The invention was not designed for weather modification, but instead for agricultural purposes, specifically for crop dusting and pest control, and it aimed to harness the plane's exhaust gases to atomize the liquid effectively and efficiently. This invention was successful in the context of its intended agricultural use, spraying liquids over crops, and I reiterate, it was not designed for or capable of modifying weather. The patent did not fail in its specific aim, but it eventually became outdated as more efficient technologies for spraying and pest control were developed. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was a 1964 patent for a silver iodide cloud seeding generator that was intended to improve the process of cloud seeding. More specifically, the use of silver iodide to induce rainfall, disperse fogs, or modify weather patterns. Now, the idea of the concept was that silver iodide particles, when dispersed in the atmosphere, would act as nuclei for moisture to condense, leading to precipitation. The generator detailed in this patent was designed for use on aircraft, allowing for the precise distribution of silver iodide at the appropriate atmospheric altitudes to trigger rain or cloud dispersal. And the invention sought to address several key factors and challenges with existing cloud seeding technology, including the corrosive nature of silver iodide solutions. It introduced improvements such as corrosion-resistant components, automatic purging systems to clean the apparatus after use, and safer, more controlled flow of silver iodide solution. In other words, this machine was not going to rust or corrode from the silver iodide that resided inside of it. Now, this invention was largely successful in its design and function, addressing critical operational issues and enabling safer and more efficient cloud seeding from aircraft. However, its ultimate successes were still dependent on atmospheric conditions, which remained the primary limitation in weather modification efforts. While the invention did not quote fail per se, the broader effectiveness of cloud seeding continues to be debated due to inconsistent results in practical applications. And sources confirm that while the device improved on operational reliability, the unpredictability of weather modification remains an overarching limitation of cloud seeding technology. In other words, the machine didn't fail, it did what it was supposed to, but weather is unpredictable and hard to control. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was a 1964 patent for the generation of ice-nucleating crystals by John Patrick Merriweather that introduced a novel method for cloud seeding using a detonating fuse containing a mixture of silver iodide and pentaerythritol tetranitrate. This process was designed to create ice-nucleating crystals by detonating a fuse in or near supercold clouds to trigger precipitation, such as snow or rain. And the key innovation in this patent was embedding the silver iodide within the explosive core of the detonating fuse. Upon detonation, the silver iodide would be dispersed as nucleating particles, initiating the formation of ice crystals within the clouds. Now, this invention succeeded in terms of offering a high output method of generating silver iodide particles for cloud seeding. However, like the other cloud seeding techniques, its effectiveness was limited by atmospheric variability, and its efficiency was lower than that of prior methods. While the invention worked in producing ice-nucleating crystals, its broader impact on successful weather modification was inconsistent due to the inherent challenges of cloud seeding. So yes, while the invention worked for making ice crystals in clouds, it did not always succeed in actually making it rain or snow. All right, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US3174150A. And this was a 1964 patent for the electrostatic mixing and microbial conversions that introduced a novel method to mix hydrocarbons with microbial cells using electrostatic charges. This process was developed to address the challenge of mixing water-based microbial cells with hydrocarbons, which naturally did not mix well. And the technique employed atomizing both the hydrocarbon particles and microbial cells, charging them with the opposite electrical charges so that they would attract, and then allowing the oppositely charged streams to interact. Now, in simpler terms, I don't know. I'm not Bill Nye here. It gave these microbes and what was really oil opposite electric charges, and when they met, they would stick together, making it much easier for the microbes to work on the oil. The invention was helpful because it saved energy and was overall better compared to traditional mechanical mixing methods, which required powerful stirrers. And this was just using electricity. And if you notice, this invention was not for changing the weather. It was just about mixing things better. Yippee. All right, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US3174150A, and this was a 1965 patent for a self-focusing antenna system developed by Peter J. Fraza and Richard L. Smeeds. And this was an advanced design for high-gain antenna arrays capable of self-focusing on moving targets. This patent aimed to address the limitations of traditional large parabolic antennas and phased array systems by implementing a phase-locked loop system that dynamically corrected for phase and frequency shifts caused by atmospheric disturbances and target movement, particularly in the presence of the Doppler effect. Now, this was not a failed invention, as it introduced foundational concepts that contributed to advancements in antenna technology, specifically for high-gain broadband systems that can track moving targets effectively in communication and radar applications. However, the lack of mainstream recognition for this particular patent is likely due to the continued evolution of related technologies rather than any inherent failure of the concept itself. And no, this invention was not a weather modification system. Its primary function was to improve antenna performance for communication and radar systems, especially in tracking moving objects or transmitting and receiving signals with high precision. There's no connection or indication that this patent was intended for or could be applied to weather modification. All right, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3257601A, and this was a 1965 patent that was essentially a special mixture of materials like aluminum and boron to help rockets and other things like flares ignite and burn. Now, this mixture produced a large amount of heat and was easy to light, which was important for rockets and space vehicles, and it was also dense and strong, meaning that it could pack a lot of power without taking up too much space and was perfect for things that needed to fly into space. Now, there's no indication that this pyrotechnic composition failed, as the design outlined in the patent reflects a solid understanding of pyrotechnics, particularly for applications in high-performance ignition systems and propellants. However, it's important to note that this patent was not a weather modification device. It was focused on pyrotechnic compositions used in ignition systems and propulsion. The primary applications were for aerospace technologies such as rockets, and there is no indication that this patent was intended for or applied to weather modification. All right, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3234337A, and this was a 1966 patent that describes a, quote, smoke-producing apparatus designed to generate visible smoke or vapor by heating a liquid such as oil using an electrical heating element. This device is compact and primarily intended for use in toys like locomotives, buildings, and other small models to simulate smoke exhaust. And the innovation focuses on a simple design with a tubular or capillary element that carries the liquid and uses electrical current to heat the liquid, which then evaporates and produces smoke. Now, this patent pretty much achieved its goal. Its design was simple and had applicability to toys and models, and was small and easy to use and could fit in all kinds of little toys. It wasn't meant to change the weather, and it worked well for what it was supposed to do. It was a mini smoke machine. Even in large quantities, it would not be able to make rain. All right, the next patent we're going to be talking about is US3274035A, and this was a 1966 patent titled metallic composition for the production of hygroscopic smoke, and describes a pyrotechnic composition designed to produce hygroscopic smoke with potential applications in weather modification and fog clearance. More specifically, it was intended for cloud seeding and inducing precipitation and clearing fog from large areas such as aircraft runways. And the composition itself involved a mix of lithium carbonate, hexachlorothane, aluminum, and potassium perchlorate, which all burns completely without residue, producing hygroscopic or water-attracting smoke that absorbs moisture from the atmosphere. Now, this invention didn't become very popular as other methods worked better, as a different material that we talked about, silver iodide, was already being used to attempt to make rain, and it worked better than this smoke. And the chemicals used in this smoke could be harmful to the environment, which made people worry about using this on a bigger scale. And in the end, while it was a cool idea to use smoke to change the weather, it didn't become widely used because there were better and safer ways to attempt to do it. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was a 1967 patent titled Means for Communication Through a Layer of Ionized Gases. And this is specifically not a weather modification invention, but rather a communication technology developed to overcome radio signal blockages caused by ionized gas layers around space vehicles during atmospheric re-entry or exit. The purpose of this patent was to provide a method of transmitting and receiving electromagnetic waves through the ionized gas layer, commonly referred to as plasma, that forms around spacecraft when traveling at hypersonic speeds, as this plasma layer typically obstructs traditional communication methods, resulting in communication blackouts and critical phases of space missions. I reiterate, this was not a weather modification invention and does not directly connect to the field of weather manipulation. Instead, it was a technical attempt to maintain communication through plasma layers in spaceflight. And although this specific method was surpassed by more advanced technologies, it played a role in the development of spacecraft communication systems. And even though this idea was very helpful, newer, better ways were found to solve the problem. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was a 1967 patent titled Cloud Seeding Apparatus, describing a device for producing nucleating agents, specifically, quote, gamma-type silver iodide crystals for cloud seeding operations aimed at inducing precipitation. Now, this apparatus was designed to be airborne, installed on aircraft, and operated under challenging weather conditions to disperse silver iodide into clouds. And the objective was to promote rain by enhancing cloud condensation through these nucleating agents. Now, as we've mentioned before, the concept of cloud seeding itself, which this apparatus was made for, is not considered an outright failure, but its effectiveness has been inconsistent and remains a subject of ongoing debate in the scientific community, as cloud seeding using silver iodide or other hygroscopic materials like the smoke we talked about has been proven to work under specific meteorological conditions. However, the extent of this success varies widely depending on the availability of suitable clouds, the timing of the seeding, and other environmental factors. In some cases, cloud seeding efforts have led to small measurable increases in precipitation, while in others, the results have been marginal or difficult to distinguish from natural variations in rainfall. Now, cloud seeding is still practiced in various parts of the world, including the United States, China, and the Middle East, often supplement water supplies or mitigate droughts. However, it is generally seen as a supplementary tool rather than a guaranteed method for producing rain. This is not a method used to produce large amounts of rain, but it can be used in rain clouds to slightly increase precipitation. Even so, it is still inconsistent. Now, this patented machine worked well at spreading silver iodide into the clouds, but the big question became whether cloud seeding really makes it rain more, because sometimes it seemed to work and rain for a bit more, but in other times it was hard to actually tell if the rain came from cloud seeding or if it would have rained anyway. The machine itself was not a failure. It did its job at spreading the silver iodide, but the idea of cloud seeding still has mixed results. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was a 1967 patent titled Automatically Adjustable Airfoil Spray System with Pump, and does not seem to be directly related to weather modification, as its primary focus appears to be on a, quote, heating device for aerosol containers, such as those used for dispensing fluids like de-icing solutions, paints, and other materials. The patent describes a solid-state heating element that heats the material being dispensed from the aerosol container while maintaining a safe temperature for the container itself. so that as you sprayed it, the can would not explode. And this invention wasn't made to change the weather, but used to make spray cans work better and safely when heating was needed. And it did what it was supposed to, and did not make it rain. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3174150A, and this was a 1969 patent titled Aircraft Dispenser Pod, having self-sealing ejection tubes. And this describes a pod system designed for aircraft to dispense various materials such as radar shaft, flares, incendiaries, or even materials for weather modification like fog and rain seeding agents like silver iodide. The key feature of this invention is its self-sealing ejection tubes, which reduce aerodynamic drag and vibration when used at supersonic speeds by sealing themselves after each ejection. Now, this dispenser pod itself appears to have functioned well for its intended purpose, and for uses like weather modification, the pod could have been used to disperse cloud seeding agents, as it worked well for dropping things safely and efficiently, even when flying at high speeds. It wasn't a failure, and when it came to uses like cloud seeding, the results were mixed because, again, trying to make it rain is tricky. The pod itself did its job, but whether cloud seeding worked or not was not because of the pod. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3432206A, and this was a 1969 patent titled Fluidized Particle Dispenser, and describes a system developed for dispersing micron-sized particles into high-pressure gas flows, primarily for wind tunnel testing of scale models of ballistic missiles. The invention was designed to release small, solid particles, particularly at a constant weight flow rate, into a high-pressure gas stream to enhance visibility of airflow patterns around missile models during testing. It operates by, quote, fluidizing the particles using pressurized air and mixing them into gas flow, allowing for a steady stream of particles to be dispersed. Now, in simpler terms, it was first used to help scientists see how air moves in models of missiles in special wind tunnels, and the machine worked by blowing air through particles so that they wouldn't stick together, and it didn't have any moving parts, which made it more reliable and easier to take care of. However, when applied to weather modification, it is not directly tied to the success or failure of this dispenser. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3437802A, and this was a 1969 patent titled Titanium Dioxide Pigment Coated with Silica and Aluminum, and this does not directly relate to weather modification. Instead, it describes a process for improving titanium dioxide pigments used in paints, enamels, or coatings. Simply put, they use titanium dioxide, which helps paint look brighter and thicker so that you can't see through it so easily, and it made it even stronger and last longer outside by adding layers of silica and aluminum to the titanium dioxide. This made paint last longer in the sun and rain without it wearing or fading, and this invention was all about making paint more durable for outdoor use and was not meant to change the weather or do anything like that. It didn't make it rain. Alright, the next patent we're going to talk about is US3441214A, and this was a method and apparatus for seeding clouds. And this process involved dropping a package containing, of course, silver iodide from an aircraft, which was equipped with timed fuses and detonators to explode and release the silver iodide at the right altitude, allowing it to act as a ice-nucleating agent. Now, this package would be ejected from an aircraft, and upon ejection, it would be blown up, releasing the agents into the clouds at a predetermined altitude. And yes, while the technology described in this patent for cloud seeding is based on well-established principles of weather modification, particularly the use of silver iodide, we've discussed that cloud seeding results can be unpredictable due to numerous factors, including temperature, humidity, and cloud type. And over the years, controlled studies of cloud seeding have shown mixed results, as some studies indicate that cloud seeding can enhance precipitation by 5 to 15%, while others show minimal or no effects. Alright, the last patent we're going to talk about is US20030085296A1, and this describes a 2001 patent titled Hurricane and Tornado Control Device, describing a method to influence weather systems, particularly hurricanes and tornadoes, by projecting high decibel sound waves into the atmosphere. The idea is to use low-frequency sound waves, 100 to 2000 hertz, to either disrupt or enhance the formation and path of storms, potentially controlling their behavior or even generating rain. Now, the weather modification method described in this patent has not been successfully applied in any practical or effective manner, and the idea of using sound waves to control large-scale weather systems like hurricanes and tornadoes remains scientifically unproven and largely speculative. In simple terms, hurricanes and tornadoes are very strong, way stronger than sound waves. The energy in these storms is so huge, it's comparable to several atomic bombs going off every second. Sound waves do not have enough power to make a difference. Again, there's no proof that sound waves can actually control storm, and scientists haven't done any successful experiments showing that sound can stop or change hurricanes or tornadoes, and even if they tried, it would be really hard to get the sound to hit the right part of the storm in such unpredictable weather. So while this was an interesting idea, using sound waves to control big storms hasn't worked in real life, and it's still just a theory with no real results. Just a theory, a film theory. Now, after we talked about all these patents, I'd like to point out that maybe people consider that there might be a pattern within all these devices, maybe forging together, creating one giant weather control device or something like that. And I want to say that people like to find patterns in scenarios in which there aren't any patterns at all. So please don't fall victim to this, because you could literally do that with anything. You could get a whole bunch of patents together and then be like, oh yeah, there's like, they're making like dog jetpacks or whatever. I don't know. You know what I mean? I hope you understand what I'm saying. And take everything Marjorie Taylor Greene says with a grain of salt, because this is literally a person who blamed the 2018 California wildfires on a secret Jewish space laser. However, maybe given enough ingenuity and determination from the greatest minds around the world, maybe by 2026, we might be able to make burgers fall from the sky. One can only dream. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Halloween special coming soon. Stay safe, y'all. I love you, bro.